Chapter 6 Jason's Gold. When the three crewmen pulled him aside, Jason had no ticket to show them, no Klondikers on board to name as his companions. After searching his pack sack, they patted him down and took the $10 Mrs. Beale had given him. He'd been hoarding it for the Skagway. Then they walked him down the gangplank at Juneau in the dark. The three never said who had fingered him as a stowaway, yet Jason never wondered for a second. "Thief," one of the men snarled as they yanked him into deeper darkness behind a warehouse. Another punched Jason in the stomach, and the wind went out of him. As he buckled, he saw the silhouette of a raised nightstick. Pain broke like a lightning bolt. Then the world exploded, and he felt nothing. Jason came to in the middle of the night, trembling and alone. He put his hand to the back of his head, where the worst of the pain was coming from. His hair was matted with blood, and his scalp screamed at the slightest touch. Beyond the docks, lights were twinkling. This was Juneau, he realized, remembering what had happened. He failed to make it to Skagway. He had failed. He had no money, no food, no home to go back to, and his brothers had no notion he was in Alaska and in bad trouble. His fear flared into anger at his brothers for what they had done, taking his $500. But as he pictured their faces, his anger wouldn't stick. He knew they thought they were doing a good thing. Ethan and Abraham believed they were going to make him rich. Babyface Kid Barker came to mind instead, then Captain Smith, Reverend Bowers, and Slim Jim Foster and Old Man Tripp. Imposters and crooks, all of them. This was their fault. A few feet away, the dark shape of his pack sack caught his eyes. At least he hadn't lost everything. He still had some clothes, and his pack, and the 7 Seas. Jason reached for the pack sack and dragged it under his head, which he lowered gingerly until it came to rest. He slept. At dawn, he was standing at the beach with his pack on his back and his head throbbing, trying to figure out what to do next. 2 piers away, a steamer called the City of Topeka was loading cargo and chuffing smoke. Jason's head felt like it was in a vice, and the heavyweight champion of the world was battering it with a sledgehammer. He'd come so close. One more night on the Yakima, and he would have been there. Normally he would keep self-pity at bay, but at the moment he was too exhausted. Maybe it was time to give up and head back to Seattle. Maybe the City of Topeka is heading south, he thought. They might need coal stokers. I can work my way home. Jason battled his own weariness. Get off the mat, he finally told himself. You aren't licked yet. You have more staying power than that. If he could just get to Skagway somehow without losing much more time, he could rejoin the race or the fight or whichever way it was going to be. His stomach twisted on itself and clamored for attention. You've been this hungry before, he told himself, many times. Jason looked north along the Gravely Beach, at the high tide line. The blue smoke of a campfire wound its way into the tops of the giant spruces. An early morning campfire meant food. It would be the first time he resorted to a handout. He started walking. His eye was drawn to a patch of bright red halfway down the beach. A red-shirted man using a driftwood log for a backrest. The man was reading. Jason realized as he got closer, he looked over 20, right around Ethan's age. The fellow was so engrossed in his book, he was unaware that anyone was approaching. Clearing his throat, Jason stepped up and asked, What are you reading? Must be pretty good. Surprised, the young man looked up with his deep-set, blue-gray eyes that sparkled with intelligence. Origin of Species by Charles Darwin, he replied. Red Shirt's broad smile owed part of its cheerfulness, somehow, to a missing tooth. Isn't Darwin the one who says we're descended from apes? Yep, Red Shirt said, springing athletically to his feet. He was of average height, only an inch or two smaller than Jason, with powerful square shoulders. The fellow stuck out his hand. Name's Jack. They shook. Jason. And what if we are descended from apes, Jason? The young man asked with a provocative, playful gleam in his eyes. How would that suit you? Before Jason could answer, the stranger's eyes went to the matted hair to the back of Jason's head. Got a bad whack there, looks like. Pirates, Jason said with a smile. It was easy to banter with his fellow Jack. Ah, they get your gold. Fortunately, I hadn't got any yet. You're on your way to the Klondike. I was. I'd like to be. Jack looked toward the pier in Juneau, where Jason had come from. Where's your outfit, Jason? Your partners? I'm on my way. I'm on my own hook, he replied. A man after my own heart, but I wouldn't like my chances solo on this trip. It's not by design. I'm trying to catch my brothers. They're only a few days in front of me. How far is Skagway? Do you know? Jack grinned. You're closing in on it, my friend. 80 miles or so. I didn't see you on the City of Topeka. I was on the Yakima. It stopped here last night to take on water for its boilers. Jack's blue-gray eyes were speculating why Jason had ended up on the beach alone in Juneau. He pushed a tangle of his wavy dark hair back from his forehead and looked north to the campfire. At least one of my partners is vertical. That's a hopeful sign. You wouldn't be interested in some flapjacks and bacon by any chance? I'd cut off my right foot for breakfast, I don't mind saying. Jack's open, laughter-loving face was radiant with generosity and the offer of friendship. Let's walk slow, Jack said. You got me dying of curiosity on a number of counts. Would you swap me your story in exchange for those flapjacks? They started down the beach, Jack pausing to pick up a throwing stone and sail it out toward one of the buoys, marking the shipping channel. Jason joined in, and it became a friendly contest. In between throws, Jason sketched his story all the way from New York to the nightstick on his head. At the last, Jack winced. Could have come out far worse. You might have ended up in Juneau's jail. What happened to you last night brings to mind a month I spent in Buffalo, New York, in the state penitentiary. You look surprised. It was during a year I tramped from California to the east and back. I went to see the falls in Niagara and ended up on the rock pile for vagrancy. They locked me up because I couldn't name a local hotel. It doesn't take much if they're out to get you. As if for emphasis, Jack reached the first stone and heaved a splendid throw that came up barely short of a buoy. Inspired by the combination of Jack's toss and his story, Jason put everything he had into his next throw and actually struck the buoy. It rang like a bell. Well, I'll be, Jack declared, shaking his head. I've never bested at rock throwing in my life. You've got not only distance but accuracy. Where'd you get an arm like that? Jason chuckled, disbelieving his own success. Don't ask me to repeat that. It's from tossing a baseball with my brothers. I've had a lot of practice. You should see my mitt. It looks like a chewed-up scrap of leather that a dog's been hauling around. They were close enough to camp now that they could smell the bacon frying. 4 men were moving around. At Jason's bidding, his new friend went on to tell a little more of his story. Jack was from Oakland, California. He worked in a cannery too, 10 cents an hour, 12 hours a day, and a jute mill and a laundry. At 17, he was working on a sealing ship in the Arctic. He hoboed east after that, then returned to Oakland in the life of a work beast, as he put it, until the Klondike broke. Jack had been on fire to go north, but had no money. His sister Eliza and her husband, Captain Shepard, had grub-staked him in exchange for helping to get Captain Shepard to the goldfields. Jack's brother-in-law was 60 years old and a veteran of the war between the states. On the voyage north, Jack and Captain Shepard had formed a partnership with the 3 other men on the beach. You weren't able to get a ship going all the way to Skagway, Jason wondered aloud. Not one that was leaving soon enough, but last night we hired the rest of the trip in Indian canoes. We met a party of Tlingits on their way north to work in the packing trade. Jason was about to ask if there might be room for him in a canoe, but they arrived in camp and 4 pairs of eyes were on him. Jack introduced him to his partners and made a joke about Jason helping to lighten the mountain of food they were going to have to carry over the Chilkoot Pass. Jason remembered that Kid Barker had mentioned the Chilkoot Pass. Is that a better route than the White Pass? 10 miles shorter, one of the men said curtly. Merritt Sloper didn't look overjoyed about one of his partners inviting a 6th for breakfast. Supposed to be an old Indian trail, rasped Captain Shepard, who seemed short of breath. Shepard had a grizzled beard and wore a wide-brimmed Stetson over his silver hair. The Chilkoot's so steep at the last pitch, they say your chin might overtop your eyebrows if you look up to the summit. Everyone laughed. Jason thought he heard a good deal of apprehension in the old man's voice about the Chilkoot Pass. Another partner, a man named Goodman, was pointing south toward the end of the pier. A number of tall, proud Indian canoes were paddling in their direction. 11 canoes it turned out to be. The Indians kept their streamlined and somewhat fragile dugouts in the shallows and walked ashore, men, women, and children. With no discussion, they headed directly toward the mounted outfits and started shouldering the supplies to the canoes. In half an hour, everything was loaded. Jack's partners were wading out to the canoe. Jack was last. He seemed to be eyeing the space that was left, if any. So was Jason, as best he could, from the beach. The canoes were heavily loaded. A steamer passed them by, heading north. Hundreds of stampeders were waving at them from the decks. A voice like a foghorn hollered down, "Klondike or bust!" A second steamship appeared beyond the first, and here came a third. Sloper yelled from his canoe, almost frantically, "Come on, let's go!" Boarding the last dugout, Jack looked inside it for a moment, then waved Jason forward. Get in! You need to catch your brothers.